So right now we have a correction and coating going down. Right now we're in the cutting phase. And one thing I want to talk to you about in this video is making sure you're spending as much time as you can on the areas that matter most. Like for instance, if you're doing an 8-hour correction, a 15-hour correction, you want to spend most of that time where it matters most. Now, you know, maybe a small percentage will differ here and there, but for the most part, if you're doing a correction, coating, you want to spend a majority of that time on the correction and coating. And what I'm getting at is when you're prepping the vehicle, you want to get through that phase as quickly and efficiently as you can. Like for instance, if this was 12 years ago, I would have done so many steps in the prep process. I would have foamed it down, let it dwell, rinse off, foam it again, wash it with 3 wash mitts, rinse it off, foam it. This was way back in like 2012, right? So different times. But that's what I did first starting off. Like I would do that much prep work because I thought you have to be so gentle and use the nicest wash mitts and don't put one little scratch in there. Now, the way we do things now is we're still gonna do all the same process. We're still going to clean the wheels, the inner barrels, the fenders, the tires. We're still going to wash, clay, iron, decon, and if it's gonna require brush work all around the emblem and stuff, we'll still do that. Our goal is to though get through that phase as quickly as we can. So I don't know, I mean, there's no real set rule because like, it really depends on how you price and budget your work. But let's say you have, you know, let's say you charge $50 an hour or $100, it doesn't matter, but let's say $100 an hour. And you know it's gonna take you 10 hours to do this job. So it's gonna be $1,000 and you need to finish it in 10 hours because that's what lets you hit $100 an hour. Of that 10 hours, where, in terms of the customer, right, what the customer is paying for, where does the customer get the most value from it? Now, depending on the service that you're doing, the vehicle that you're working on, what the customer specifically wants, this might change here and there. But for the most part, the customer is gonna get the most value in correcting, polishing, coating the vehicle, right? Again, it's gonna change vehicle to vehicle, but as a whole, I think we can all agree, if you're charging $1,000 for, let's just call it a correction, right? Not even a coating, because that'd be kind of cheap. Let's just call it a coating. I'm making an example here. If you're gonna do a correction and coating in 10 hours and you're charging $100 an hour, 90% of that time should be spent on the correction, because if you're giving yourself more time to cut down the swirls, right? I'd rather get, you know, let's say it takes you an hour to prep, 8 hours to cut and polish, and then 1 hour to coat, for example. I want to give myself as much time during that cutting and polishing phase so that maybe if there's some areas that have some deeper isolated scratches, okay, maybe I can get the rotary out and just hit those specific areas. Or maybe if there's a really deep scratch, well, maybe I have enough time in there to work in a few wet sanding spots here and there to kind of just, you know, to produce better results. Now, if of that 10-hour detail, you're spending, call it 3 hours, which, I mean, it really shouldn't. 3 hours on the prep process, right? Now you only have, you know, call it 5 hours to cut and polish, and then 2 hours for the coating. I'm making up numbers here, but you get the point. You wanna give yourself the largest room of time where it matters most, and that's gonna be in the correction and polish, right? The coating, I mean, it should probably take you like an hour, hour and a half, depending on the size and what all you coat, because, you know, like for us, when we do a ceramic coating, we coat all exterior surfaces, minus the glass, but we coat the trim, the wheels, the wheel faces, the paint. So it just depends on what you're offering. But it goes to show, like, when we're talking about the prep process, I'm not gonna, like this one wasn't that bad in terms of when it came into us, but regardless, I'm not going to foam it down and be super gentle with the wash. I'm okay adding, making up numbers here, 5% swirls to the paint in the prep process, because I'm going to remove 80% of the swirls in the paint work when I start correcting. And since I'm giving myself more time during the correction, it's no different, right? Like, even if you are adding the itsy bittiest little bit of swirls in the paintwork, an all-in-one polish will get those out. So like today, it was like 20 degrees outside when I started washing the vehicle. I don't want to get my hands that wet. I don't want to get my feet wet. So naturally, I want to use less water. That way I'm not as cold and my fingers aren't drying up and my socks don't get wet. So instead of rinsing it, foaming it, washing it, rinsing it, I'm simply going to give it a rinse on the bottom half of the vehicle because there's a little bit of caked on dirt. The rest of the vehicle gets a rinseless wash, right? Now, granted, if it's like super caked on, of course, you're gonna have to, do more work because it's just too caked on. But on vehicles that truly don't need the extra work, don't do the extra work, right? Because it's not needed. Like for this one, once we clayed it, I did a test spot on the iron decon. I sprayed it on the hood, on a door panel, and like somewhere in the rear quarter. And I let it dwell. And if it turns purple in those 3 areas, I'll iron decon the entire vehicle. On this vehicle, it didn't. Like in no area did it start to bleed purple. So I'm not gonna iron decon the entire vehicle. So I skipped that step altogether. Not because I was cutting short, it didn't need it. Because the vehicle itself, during the clay process, there was nothing on it. So I'm not gonna get a clay bar and diligently like clay the entire vehicle when this vehicle in itself is like, it's already smooth to the touch, right? So same thing with the iron decon. I'm not gonna iron decon the entire vehicle when it doesn't need it. So you wanna factor in, what are you delivering to the customer? Where can you get the most value? What condition is it in, right? So like for instance, when we're doing an overspray removal, the main focus with that one a lot of times is they want the overspray removal off, and sometimes they don't even pay for the polish, right? Granted, of course, like when we're doing overspray removal, we'd love for them to pay for at least a light polish. But a lot of times, especially like on a work truck, that's a white work truck, they just like, hey man, it feels really rough, I just want to get that off. Well, on that one, our main focus and where a majority of our time is going to be spent is removing the overspray, right? We're going to use a clay disc, a clay bar, and we're going to get very detailed, get the glass, get everything. But our main focus there is we need to spend most of our time just removing the overspray. So we're not going to spend a large portion of the time cleaning the wheels and tires. Don't get me wrong, we're still doing the full process, right? We're still doing everything we're supposed to be doing. We're just not taking that long. So on not that this is 10 hours, but just as the example, if you're working on a 10-hour detail and you're charging $100 an hour and it's gonna be $1,000, where does it help the customer the most, right? Let's say the wheels are super caked on, where it should require a wheels off detail, right? And in your mind, you're like, oh, well, I want to make sure I get these wheels really good. So like, I'm gonna spend 2 hours on the wheels, and I have plenty of time on the coating. So you take 2 hours away just cleaning the wheels and tires, and you still got to wash the vehicle, clean all that. So all in all, you're 2.5 hours in on the wheel cleaning process, right? And the prep process. Now, to you as a detailer, you might say, oh man, like my OCD, like I really need to clean those wheels because I need to clean them. Now, something like that should have been addressed before you started the detail with the customer, right? So like for instance, for us, if a vehicle comes in for a wash and then we wash it and there's still water spots on there, well, it's not our responsibility to remove those water spots when you came in here for just a wash, right? Like if they say, oh, you couldn't get off the water spots with the wash, it's like, no, that's, because the condition, whatever, that's actually required, that's a different level of service to remove those water spots from your paint. That'd actually be paint correction. So same thing with the wheels, to where if you're just doing it because it feels good and want to do it, if it's taking you that much time, that should be a separate service altogether, right? So, and again, that's why I say it's dependent on the service that you're offering, because if you are charging for a 3-step, like a multi-step correction, where you're gonna do a rotary cut, a DA, and then a polish, and you're able to spend that extra time. Okay, well, instead of it being a 10-hour detail and charging $100 an hour, maybe you need to charge 18 hours. So now it'll be an $1,800 detail because you're doing so much extra work. The problem, because you see you're charging $100 an hour, you're charging $1,000 for the detail, and you're trying to cram in 15 hours of work, which is unfair to you, right? Because now you're moving super fast, doing this, doing that, just because what, like, if you didn't set those expectations with the customer, and now you're just doing it because you want to do it, that's just not a sustainable way to do it. If you want to do extra work and you charge $100 an hour, again, literally, if you charge 50, 80, 40, just change the number out. If you wanted to take an extra 4 hours of work, wet sanding certain areas, or spending more time on the wheels, or whatever the case may be, you need to charge more for that. Instead of quoting a 10-hour detail internally, not to the customer, but internally, you should quote a 14-hour detail. So instead of it being $1,000, it needs to be $1,400. So don't fall into this mindset that like it has to be this certain specific way every single time, right? Like again, if I go back 12, 14 years ago, I mean, I'd do the 3-bucket wash method. I'd have a dedicated wheel bucket with 4 gallons of water in there. I'd have 3 wash mitts. I'd use 2 drying towels. I'd foam it down 2-3 times. Like I did the most extreme prep process. And I mean, I would never do anything closely to that because it's simply not needed. It's inefficient. And I mean, look, like we're running a business. So whatever you're charging, you have to do your process within that budget and time frame. So as much as you want to have that like I'm an artist detailer mentality, you are running a business. And again, if you want to be more artsy and be more of a detailer that you're able to spend more time getting all into the nooks and crannies and getting to every single angle, well, charge for that. If you're quoting a 10-hour detail, again, internally, not to the customer, but if you're quoting a 10-hour detail and you're charging $1,000 and you know it's supposed to take you closer to maybe 13 hours, okay, well then charge $1,300 for the detail or for the correction. Again, if you know it's gonna take you 18 hours and you're charging 12 hours, you can't make up that difference right there. Like you can't find yourself to find 6 hours of free work to fit within that 13-hour detail or that 10-hour detail. Again, just make up examples here, but you get the point though. It's okay to not do every step because it doesn't need it. Again, if there's a vehicle that's heavily contaminated, that has a bunch of grime, your prep process will take longer, naturally, right? That being said, what can you do during that prep process? Even if it's in an extreme condition where it's dirty, it's contaminated, there's overspray, let's say, what steps can you take though to still minimize the prep process so you have the most time correcting, polishing, and coating the vehicle? That's the real key here. It's just how do you minimize the prep process? And again, like any phase, like you can have the same mentality with the correction, right? Like, of course, it's gonna take you longer than the prep, but like, is there things you can do instead of wiping off the polish after every pass? Do the whole cut, look through the polish, hit a few spots, and then wipe it down. Or if you're gonna do a rotary cut and you know what you're getting, just grab the DA and hit it with the polish that's already on the panel, and then wipe it down, and you've already hit both rotary and DA cut. So you get the point here. Like you can apply this anywhere, but I'm specifically talking about like the prep process because you want to get to that part as quickly as you can because you want to spend it where the customer gets more value. By the way, I am doing something different with my courses, and now you can get access to all my trainings, all the courses in under one membership. So back then I had like multiple memberships for these courses, but instead, if you want to learn how to market your business, how to run your business, how to do social media for your business, you get all those trainings, which in total is like 40 plus hours of training, like 30 plus hours of training probably. You get all of that inside of one training program. So click the link down below if you want to give it a try. Whether you're just getting started, whether you want to learn how to specifically optimize your website, or you want to learn how to, I don't know, figure out your pricing, all that is under one membership. So just click the link down below. It's called Detailers Growth Academy. And we're gonna be doing a bunch of stuff in there. And like for instance, this is a $1,300 detail. It's doing a 2-step, no rotary, and it'll be done by 4 o'clock. So I'll end the video right there. Let me know if you have any specific questions, and I'll see you on the next one.